Dale Jr. is still on the table of potentially buying a Cup charter, and Shane Gisbergen could be full-time in the Cup Series in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brad Keselowski's 2024 Bill Submarine Boston Red Sox scheme that we're going to see at New Hampshire. This looks like a throwback to the Carl Edwards scheme from back in the day when Carl Edwards did have the Boston Red Sox scheme, I believe in 2007 or 2008. This looks amazing. This looks great. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at New Hampshire in a couple weeks. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sammy Smith's 2024 Allstate Peterbilt scheme that we'll see in 2 races in 2024, including at the Chicago Street Course. Scheme's okay in my opinion, not the best looking scheme. I think it's okay though. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend, or not this weekend, but later this year at Chicago. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2024 United Construction scheme that we're going to see at New Hampshire. Scheme looks pretty good in my opinion. One thing about Alpha Prime is they've done a really good job with their paint schemes. This one looks pretty solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at New Hampshire in a couple weeks. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Alex Bowman's 2024 Allied Pride scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Sonoma. It's not really the best looking scheme, to be honest. I'm not going to lie. They could have done a better job on this. I like the initiative they're doing, but I'm not as big fan of this paint scheme. Hopefully Alex Bowman can have a good run in this scheme this weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Sonoma purse money. Every time you have a Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $8,426,274. And for the Xfinity race, it's $1,747,861. I feel like the Xfinity purse money, of how much travel they're going to have to do, I feel like they could have made it a little higher, but it's not awful. All things considered, it's better than last week's for sure. And Cup's got some pretty good purse money, but you do have to remember there are 38 cars there instead of 36. The numbers are not too bad in my opinion. They could be definitely better, but honestly, they're not too bad overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about vehicles. As it was reported by Toby Christie that there's a new rule coming in for vehicles on the grid. He says all vehicles not on the starting grid will now start at the tail end of the field. You had basically 5 minutes to have it on the grid before the race began. If you don't have your car on the grid, like other drivers are making unexpected changes, you'll have to go to the rear of the field. I think this is a really good change in my opinion. Well, I'm not sure if this is a really good change or not, but this means that people have a little more time in the inspection line, and it means they'll get the chance and the opportunity to make sure everything is set up and ready to go for pre-race tech. If you have issues in pre-race tech and it's hard to get through the tech session, you might get in trouble. Nonetheless, very interesting rule coming in. I'm not surprised to see some of the rule changes. I'm not really shocked or surprised about it overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Labbe. As it was announced yesterday that Alex Labbe will drive a 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Sonoma. Alex Labbe is a veteran in the road course scene, also is a winner of the champion of the Penny Series, and also, of course, has been pretty good on road courses as well. I'm really glad to see him back in Xfinity. I think he deserves a chance and an opportunity to race in this series, and I think he's going to do a really solid job with SS Greenlight. And I think this car is a little bit in danger when it comes to owner's points, but if there's anybody that can get the best out of equipment, it is definitely Alex Labbe. I think he's going to do a really solid job, and I do think he'll have a really great chance and opportunity to make the field with this team this weekend at Sonoma Raceway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Tomasi. As it was announced on Wednesday that Tyler Tomasi will be driving for the Raymond Brothers Racing later this year at Indianapolis Raceway Park. I don't remember if this is going to be his debut in trucks or not. I think he's made a start or two in trucks in the past, if I'm not mistaken. But if this truly is his debut, glad to see him joining this series. He's got a lot of experience, I think, in USAC, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a really good opportunity and chance for him to make a run with this team. I think he's going to do okay, in my opinion. The Raymond Brothers have shown a little bit more speed this year. Lost Allen's been having a lot more top 20s consistently. So it seems like this team is really starting to show a lot more speed consistently. I think it's really good to see him have a chance and opportunity. And I really hope he can make the best of it with this organization later this year at Indianapolis Raceway Park. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course. As it was reported by Matt Weaver and Toby Christie that now Cup drivers are eligible to run the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the Chicago Street Course this year. Remember, last year Cup drivers were not allowed to run the race, Xfinity Series race at Chicago. The reason being is because they felt like if Cup guys ran that race, they would have had an advantage running the Xfinity race and then use that experience for Cup. Now, because everybody's had a year of experience, they're going to get the chance and opportunity to run both. We know Kyle Larson is going to be doing double duty. I think Ty Gibbs is going to be doing double duty. And if I'm not mistaken, SVG will be doing double duty during that weekend as well. I think this is a really, really good change they made at least for this year because I want to see some Cup guys run it, and it will help with ticket sales for sure going into next year. I think this is the right move. I get why people are not going to be fans of this overall, but personally, like I said, I don't think this is a bad move. I think this actually overall is a good move on their part, and Cup guys, like I said, will get the chance and opportunity to run in the Xfinity Series race later this year at Chicago. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sonoma Raceway. As it was officially reported first by Joseph Strigley that Sonoma has replaced the tire barriers at the inside of turn number 11 with a permanent wall. This definitely caused a little bit of controversy as some people really like there not being a permanent wall, but it's kind of like how they have it in the video games. A lot of the video games, I think like Forza's got it, and I also think some of the old NASCAR games like NASCAR 9, they have a permanent wall there. It seems like what NASCAR is going to start trying to do is they're going to be trying to enforce track limits by not enforcing track limits, because if you hit that wall, there's a very good chance and possibility that your car is going to get destroyed. So especially if you hit the rear of the car, basically you'll knock the toe link out, which I don't think anybody wants. To me, it's a little controversial for sure. I'm not as riled up about this as like when they removed some of the stuff on the backstretch at Watkins Glen. I just think that I get why people don't like it. Apparently the drivers knew about it, so this is new information that we got. Again, I get why people are upset about this. Believe me, I get it. I understand. But at the same token, same time, I guess it's to protect the drivers from themselves because these drivers sometimes can go absolutely balls to the wall and make a lot of stupid moves on the track. So really not shocked or surprised to see this overall. They're doing this. I think they're trying to start preventing drivers from exceeding track limits at this point by not penalizing them because there were so many track limit issues at COTA. I think that's why they made this change here. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christopher Bell. Now, Chris Bell was interviewed by Bob Pockrass yesterday about what happened at Gateway. Coming to the end of the Cup Series race at Gateway, Christopher Bell had arguably the fastest car in the event. But all of a sudden, he started backing off, and he said he was blowing an engine. Well, Christopher Bell confirmed that he says that the team broke a valve spring at Gateway. He says he hasn't really seen this in the last couple of years when Jay Jarred issues at Darlington where both Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. blew engines, which I think were valve spring issues the last time. But that's one of the things that's kind of crazy is they broke a valve spring, and I have to imagine maybe shifting might have caused that problem. It's very, like I said, it's very rare nowadays to see an engine just let go and blow up like that. And it's really tough for Christopher Bell because he, like I said, was easily going to win that race. He had the dominant car, and there's nobody in his own zip code in that race. So to see something like that just go up in smoke is really, really bad. But at least the good news is we know it wasn't something maybe he did. It might have just been something in the car that might have been broken. Because we haven't, like I said, we haven't really seen a lot of his issues come up this year. I'm not really surprised or shocked to see this overall. I feel bad for Bell in that case, but it sucks to see. And again, I'm not really surprised or shocked to see that a broken valve spring cost him a shot at a great run at Gateway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about David Malukas. As it was announced earlier this morning that David Malukas will be driving the 66 for Meyer Shank Racing for the rest of 2024, starting at Laguna Seca. Remember, Dave Malukas is supposed to drive full-time this year for Aaron McLaren, but because of a clause in a contract where you can only miss 4 races in a season, including the Thermal Club, he ended up missing that and unfortunately was let go and fired. Obviously, we know Tom Blomqvist has been struggling immensely this year, and they brought Cassia Neves in for a few races. Of course, Julio is a part owner of the organization, but now Dave Malukas is going to get the chance and opportunity to make some runs with Meyer Shank this year, and maybe if he does well enough, he'll run full-time with them them in 2025. Dave Malukas did not get a fair shake, in my opinion, and I think he's going to do an excellent job with Meyer Shank. I think he is going to be a contender because I think Dave Malukas can always get the best out of equipment, especially when we go to some of these ovals like Iowa. We know how great of a driver he is at Iowa, and especially tracks like Worldwide Technology. I think he's going to be really strong and competitive there. I'm glad to see he's getting a second chance and opportunity. I think he truly deserves a second chance and opportunity, and I think he will for sure be able to make the best out of it with Meyer Shank Racing throughout the rest of 2024. A really great opportunity for him, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Yahoo. As it was announced yesterday that Yahoo will sponsor Sam Hunt Racing for 3 races in 2024. They'll sponsor Corey Hunt for 2 of those races. Corey Hunt will run Iowa next weekend and will also run in New Hampshire the week after that. Then Tyler Reddick will get the chance to drive the 26 car at Nashville Super Speedway. Corey Hunt, when he's driven for Sam Hunt, I think he's done a really solid and really good job with the team. And Tyler Reddick, he's been pretty good in Nashville, so I think that both these guys have a good chance and opportunity to go out there and win. I expect the pace to be there for both those guys. And it's good to see Yahoo continue to work outside of basically teams like JGR and work with some of the drivers and other teams. It's a really great opportunity. And again, it's cool to see that both drivers get the chance and opportunity for drive for a team like Sam Hunt Racing. I think they for sure will both be able to make the best of it and do a great job with the organization later this year. So we'll see what ends up happening. But glad to see that Yahoo will be working with Sam Hunt Racing for a few races this year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Homestead Miami Speedway. As it was reported by Adam Stern in Win the Race that Homestead Miami Speedway is expected to join Formula E in 2024 to 2025 calendar. This is very interesting. Originally, there were reports and speculation that Miami was potentially going to host a date, maybe on the Miami street circuit that Formula One runs. And now it's confirmed. I think they're also going to be running in Thailand next year as well, from what I've heard. But now Homestead Miami Speedway, the road course, will be hosting Formula E racing next year. Obviously, we've seen a lot of these motorsports expanding into the United States. And now Homestead will get to run not just NASCAR, but Formula E. Can you please get IndyCar to run at Homestead in the future? Please, IndyCar, go ahead and do that. I think this is a very, very good move to see. And again, it's pretty cool that Formula E is going to be racing at Homestead Miami Speedway later this year at 2024. So I think it'll be early 2025 when they run, or it'll be at the end of this year. And it'll be running, like I said, the road course. They will not be running basically anything else. It's a very interesting move for sure. And it's pretty cool to see that Formula E will get Homestead Miami Speedway. A NASCAR track will be on the Formula E schedule in the 2025 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about F1 2026. As the 2026 regulations have been revealed for Formula One for the 2026 season. And according to this, there's some new rule changes coming in. And I think there's a little more excitement around this because while this car may not look as pretty as the current car we have, the car is going to be smaller. There's going to be no DRS and there's going to be active aero. The hope is, with the smaller car, is that the racing product can be closer and can be a lot better. One of the biggest problems that the current Formula One car has is that the car is way too big and you cannot pass because there's so much dirty air on this car. Same issue the Cup car has at the moment. I think that they're making the car smaller will actually help the racing in a big way. It may not be the most pretty looking car, but I don't care. If the race is good enough, that's all that matters to me because let's be honest and real, I have not watched a lot of Formula One races this year. I've only watched the first 2 races and then I watched Monaco Grand Prix and it made a little bit of Miami as well. And the reason being is because the racing just has not been that phenomenal this year. So hopefully in 2026, the racing can get a lot better as we also see more silly season change potentially for Formula One. Again, I hope that this leads to better racing going forward and we can see a better racing product because I want to see as good of a racing product and I think a lot of you also want to see a really strong, good racing product in Formula One as well. So I'm very happy to see that they're making changes here and hopefully the racing product, like I said, can get better for Formula One in 2026. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Arrow McLaren. As it was announced yesterday morning that Arrow McLaren has officially severed its alliance with Juncos Hollinger Racing. For those who do not know, over the week there's been a lot of hate sent over to Teo Bashir, and Teo Bashir has been sent death threats from Argentinian fans. Augustine Canapino has been liking some of those tweets, unfortunately, and they basically been calling him out on it. And Augustine Canapino kind of doubled down and it says he's afraid to go into the garage. Obviously, Callum Ilott has also been driving for Aaron McLaren. Remember, Callum Ilott also drove for Juncos Hollinger last year, and things did not end very well over there because of the Argentinian fans, unfortunately. I'm not really shocked or surprised to see this, and it's kind of sad to see, right? 'Cause I really don't care as much about the social media side of it. I am on social media. I don't care about social media as much as some people do. But in the same token, same time, if drivers are being sent death threats, that is not acceptable. And the fact that Augustine Canapino doubled down earlier this week and said he hasn't really seen any of these death threats, just because you haven't seen the death threats doesn't mean that death threats have not been sent to them. I mean, that's just unacceptable behavior on social media. And I guess social media can be extremely toxic, right? But it seems like every time, and it was from contact that happened in Detroit, and yeah, Teo Bashir made a little bit of not the smartest move in the world, but same token, same time, that's not me saying that Teo Bashir's not a good driver. Teo Bashir's a very talented race car driver, and he just made a rookie mistake. That happens, And I feel like Augustine Canapino's fans sometimes go a little bit crazy. So to me, I think it's not a really big shock and surprise to see. And this is why when you're fans of Augustine Canapino, you got to be careful what you do, because obviously I think it was a very bad move. I've seen some Argentinian fans not accepting the behavior, and I appreciate those that think that's unacceptable behavior, but I think that's really why this ended up happening, unfortunately. So again, I'm not really shocked or surprised to see this overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Eldora Speedway. As Tony Stewart officially confirmed to media reporters yesterday that Eldora Speedway is not being sold. There's been some rumors and chatter on social media from multiple sources that apparently Tony Stewart had been in discussions to sell Eldora. And obviously a lot of people actually believe these rumors. Why? Well, obviously Tony Stewart's been selling a lot of stuff off recently. He sold off the All-Star Circuit of Champions and gave that to the High Limit Series that Kyle Larson currently owns. He also sold off, of course, the SRX and no longer has ownership in that, and they're basically running with the Skip Barber Racing School, and Don Hawk is kind of taking ownership of that. And also, Stewart Haas Racing will be gone at the end of this year, at least their Cup program, and most likely their Xfinity Series program as well, which is why there's been rumors from people saying that Eldora is going to go away. Tony Stewart still, even though he's focused really on drag racing at the moment and wants to start a family, Tony Stewart obviously still has a massive passion for dirt racing. He's still got a sprint car team, for crying out loud. Donnie Schatz has been hit or miss so far this year, but Eldora Speedway is still something that Tony Stewart has owned for many years and many generations. And it would be a bad move on Tony's part if he was sell Eldora, because a lot of the people from Flow Racing were saying that Tony was selling it to them, but Tony's like, nah, we're not selling it to you guys at this moment and this point. To me, I guess it's just rumors at this point that something like this could end up happening. It doesn't shock me that there are rumors about this, don't get me wrong. But at same token, same time, Eldora Speedway, Tony Stewart's had for nearly 20 years, and I don't think Tony is going to be getting rid of it anytime soon. I'm glad to see Tony Stewart cleared up the rumors and went ahead and basically said, no, we're not selling it at this point. We're still going to be continuing it in 2025 going forward. I'm really happy to see this and glad to see that it will be continuing in 2025 and in the future for many years to come. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Connecticut. As it was reported by Race Day Connecticut that NASCAR could be racing in Connecticut in 2025. And if you actually look at the tweet, you see the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. This is very interesting. Now, where could NASCAR be racing in Connecticut? Well, there's one track in particular that I think could get the date, and that's Stafford. Stafford had a chance to get a Truck Series day, from what I understand, last year going into this year for 2025. They had a chance and opportunity to potentially race at Connecticut for this year. However, they were not able to get a deal done on that front to race at Stafford for 2024. But now it sounds like Connecticut or Stafford could be up for grabs this year for the Truck Series. Obviously, the NASCAR schedules have not been released at this point, but we are expected to get schedules in the next couple of weeks. We were supposed to get schedules, I think, last week from what I remember, but obviously those schedules are still being delayed currently at the moment because there's still some last-minute negotiations going on. I wonder if Stafford is one of those tracks that is holding up negotiations there. To me, this isn't a really big shock or surprise to see at this point that basically there's some hold up when it comes to this and negotiations there. I would love to see Stafford, though, on the on the NASCAR Truck Series schedule. I think the racing would be pretty good. I think it would generally be really, really phenomenal, and I think it'd be definitely very fun to watch. So we'll see what ends up happening in regards to that, and we'll see if we do end up going to Stafford next year. But I would definitely love to race in Stafford in the 2025 season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Wednesday late evening that Fox remains in advanced talks with IndyCar over picking up its media rights deal next year. But NBC is still in a hunt and decision is not expected before the end of this week. Obviously, there was a Racer article that came out that NBC is doing everything they can to try to keep the IndyCar rights. And according to Marshall Pruitt, they're actually trying to get every single IndyCar race on NBC. However, it was reported also by Marshall Pruitt that it sounds like that Roger is going to take the short-term gain and the long-term loss and is going to have races not just on Fox, but FS1 and FS2. We have seen Roger Penske and the Penske Entertainment Group make a lot of really bad decisions in IndyCar. And I think this would be one of the worst decisions that they could make. IndyCar is in desperate need of growing their fan base. And Fox really does not take motorsports very seriously at all. Just look at their NASCAR coverage. The NASCAR coverage, the booth has been great, but their NASCAR coverage had, in general, with the production, among other things, has not been good. And let's be real and honest, I don't want to see Joseph Newgarden looking like a superhero. I don't want to see Will Power looking like a superhero. I don't want to see race on FS2 and FS1. I want to see every single race on the top broadcasting service. That's what I want to see. So if Roger was to make a change, just make it on NBC going forward. I don't want to see races on FS1 and FS2. I get FS1, so has a lot of people, but cable's dying, y'all. So what are we doing here? Why are we looking to go to Fox? Because the coverage ain't going to be great. And it sounds like Adam Alexander instead of Alan Bestwick, he's the front runner right now, take over that commentary, which is like, really? I like Adam Alexander, but Alan Bestwick would be the better choice, and Lee Div would be the better choice. We'll see what ends up happening going forward, and we'll see. But personally, I think that Fox Sports and IndyCar together would just not really look good. I know Fox has done IndyCar races in the past, but personally, I don't think it would be really good coverage, and I think it would not be very good overall. I really hope they change their minds when it comes to the coverage, but I think, unfortunately, IndyCar is going to be going to Fox next year. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think it's a great move, but like I said, I think it unfortunately will end up happening in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart Racing's NASCAR Xfinity Series program. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Wednesday that the Xfinity program for SHR will likely be siphoned with new management. Meaning that while the SHR will not be owning the organization, because we know SHR is shutting everything down at the end of this year, there will be new ownership and new management coming in. Meaning that Joe Custer probably have still some involvement in the sport in 2025. So my big question is, who could be taking over that management? Could AM Racing perhaps be doing that, become a two-car operation? Haley Deegan more than likely be back with AM Racing next year because she does have a multi-year deal with the team. Could they be putting more funding in that? Could we see RFK Racing go back to Xfinity? Could we see Front Row go to Xfinity? Those could be some options going in next year. What about Penske? Penske was supposed to have an Xfinity program for 2022 and 2023. Obviously, that did not end up happening. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens, but at least the Xfinity program is going to be around because for outside of SHR's Xfinity program, what do you got? You've got RSS Racing, which has taken a step forward this year. Ryan Sieg's nearly won a couple races this year, but they still have not won a race in 2024. AM Racing with Haley Deegan's been a little bit of a struggle this year. And then, of course, you have Viking Motorsports who have Matt Benedetto, which has had some solid runs. And then you've got Joey Gase Motorsports, and Frankie Muniz been there a couple times, and Frankie's still unclear if he's going to be racing anytime going forward. To me, I just don't know what the future of this is going to look like going forward. But the good news is that the Xfinity Series program for Stewart Racing is expected to at least stick around for the time being. This is the good news. The bad news is I don't know what the future is going to be of this program. So we'll see what ends up happening going forward, and we'll see if it ends up making some changes to their Xfinity Series program going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson in the Indy 500. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Wednesday late morning to early afternoon, the Hendrick Motorsports spent over $3 million on its bid to have Kyle Larson run the double in 2024. Now, this is a much higher number considering normally when it comes to Indy 500, teams usually spend about $1 to $1.5 million. But this includes the test from Phoenix, and this also includes some of the extra testing that they did. Now, a big question surrounding if Kyle Larson's going to run or not. Rick Hendrick said, well, Hendrick could enter the Indy 500 again next year. It's not yet clear whether or not they're going to run the Indy 500 once again in 2025. Now, remember, Kyle Larson does technically have a 2-year contract with McLaren to run the Indy 500, but because of all the drama that's taken place with the waivers, among other things, that could hurt the chances of this ending up happening. So if Kyle Larson does not run the Indy 500 next year in 2025, blame NASCAR on this one because NASCAR got very, very salty and they got really frustrated. Larson chose the Indy 500 because Kyle Larson, in my opinion, if he runs it next year, he's going to have a chance to win it. If he had not made that mistake on pit road, he would have been in contention in that lead pack to go for the win in the victory. And had he won the Indy 500 this year, it would have been one of the biggest stories in motorsports history. A Cup Series champion going out there and winning the Indy 500. Unfortunately, like I said, he got that speeding penalty and he ended up finishing in 18th place, which still is on the lead lap, by the way. He finished and completed every single lap, and he did an excellent job throughout the month of May. I really hope they run it again next year because, like I said, I think Kyle Larson could honestly go out there and win. And again, they wouldn't have to spend $3 million because Rick Hendrick's got a lot of money, but $3 million isn't as much to Rick Hendrick as some people really make it out to be. So it's really not as much money I think some are making it out to be honest. Nonetheless, very interesting to see this move for them. And again, like I said, I really hope Kyle Larson runs the Indy 500 next year because, like I mentioned, I think Kyle Larson could absolutely easily go out there and win the Indy 500 in 2025 if he is to run it once again in the 2025 season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. Now, Daniel Suarez did a one-on-one with Bob Pockrass yesterday, and he says he's expected to sign a contract extension with Trackhouse Racing, expecting to be announced not too far down the road. Now, the terms of the contract have not been disclosed, but I would imagine it's probably going to be a 1 to 2 year extension with Trackhouse Racing, which Daniel Suarez feels really happy to be at a team that really cares for him because Daniel Suarez has been at 4 organizations in his career. But prior to Trackhouse Racing, he only had 1-year deals with the organizations or 2-year deals. He, of course, drove for Joe Gibbs Racing for 2 years in Cup. Then he went to Stewart Racing in 2019. Then he went to the Gaunt Brothers and now is driving for Trackhouse Racing. And this is, of course, his 4th year at Trackhouse. Now, I think one of the big reasons that helps Suarez likely get a contract extension with Trackhouse Racing is that win at Atlanta. He won that race by, I believe, 2 or 3 1,000ths of a second, and that is a big reason likely why he is going to be getting an extension with Trackhouse going forward. But also, you do have to remember one thing, that he also brings a lot of sponsorship to the table, and Justin Marks really likes Daniel Suarez. But outside of that win in Atlanta, Daniel Suarez has struggled immensely this year. He is currently sitting 18th or 19th in the regular season standings, to my understanding, and also is only had one other top 10 finish, and his average finished like 21st or 22nd this year, which is not very good. But to be fair, Ross Chastain has also not been having a great year so far, so keep that in mind. Even though Ross Chastain's in the playoffs, he's also been struggling to an extent so far this year. But as for Suarez getting an extension, I think this is the right decision to call because, one, you don't want to piss off your sponsors, right? The big reason why Trackhouse really formed is because Daniel Suarez is looking for a chance and opportunity back then. And again, the sponsors really like Daniel Suarez a lot, so that's why they want him to stick around. Now, going into 2025 for Daniel Suarez with this extension likely to be announced soon, he needs to really start stepping up to the plate and getting his performance a lot better because, like I said, the performance of Daniel Suarez has just not been really great so far in 2024, and he's having arguably one of his worst Cup seasons up to this point outside of the win. So he really needs to step up to the plate and get a lot better. But again, I think when you look at the sponsorship side of things, it makes a ton of sense, right? He's doing good enough. And again, this contract extension is probably going to be announced not too far down the road. We're expecting a lot of silly seeing dominoes to start falling in the not so distant future. I think, like I said, this is the right decision and right call. I guess some will disagree, and that's fine. I completely understand. But at the same token, same time, if you got the chance and opportunity to sign an extension with the driver, you go ahead and do it. And again, the question will be what happens to the rest of the drivers from Trackhouse. We'll talk about that here later in this episode. But as of right now, Daniel Suarez is expected to sign a contract extension. Still unclear if it's a 1 or 2 year deal, but I imagine it's at least going to be a 1 year extension for Daniel Suarez with Trackhouse in the 2025 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dana White. Now, Dana White was on the Flagrant podcast yesterday, and he says in a 20-second clip the Bozy Tata put up, he says he's flying to NASCAR, I think either Charlotte or Daytona Beach, and he says that he is going to be running NASCAR's new electric series. And that will be announced in the not-so-distant future. He says he'll be doing it after July 4th, which is about a month from now. Of course, that's about 27, 28 days from today. And he says that he'll be running it. Now, a lot of people saw this and they were caught off guard. But I'm not really caught off guard. I remember talking about this on the channel, I think back in November or December. But apparently Dana White was in Phoenix and was having meetings with NASCAR about running this all-electric series that they've been working on. They were supposed to actually debut this all-electric car at the Clash earlier this year, but obviously with the weather coming in, that unfortunately canceled that opportunity for that car to be showcased and shown, though they have done tests with the car. Now, for those who don't know who Dana White is, you're probably living under the rock. Dana White is part owner of the Nitrocross Series, helps Travis Pastrana on that, and also owns the UFC. Dana White being involved in NASCAR in some sort of capacity is absolutely huge. Now, when we hear the word electric series, a lot of people turn their noses and turn away. But one thing that does need to be noted is, while yes, I'm not as big a fan of electric cars as some people are, I completely understand why NASCAR is looking at this to have an all-electric separate series. The car industry is in such flux right now, currently at the moment, and no one really knows where the car industry is going to be going. But one thing that could happen with an all-electric series is you could have more manufacturers potentially join the sport. Manufacturers like, let's say, Honda. The Honda's kind of going for the hydrogen stuff, and they're rumbled to be coming into NASCAR in the future. And you've got people that could get invested, like a DJ Khaled who's interested in owning a NASCAR team at this point. And having Dana White run the operation separately makes a lot of sense. And the one thing a lot of people I think are getting mistaken at this point is that this is going to be its own separate thing. This isn't going to be any of NASCAR's current divisions are not going to be affected by this. The Cup Series won't be affected, the Xfinity Series won't be affected, Trucks won't be affected, and ARCA won't be affected, or ARCA West and East won't be affected. It's just going to be its own separate thing. I can understand why people don't like it, right? Like I said, I'm not as big a fan of electric cars, and I think we should be going toward more of the hydrogen stuff. That being said, if you got the chance and opportunity to do this, it does make a ton and a lot of sense, right? It does make a lot of sense to try to get someone like Dana White to get involved in a big way here. And Dana White, like I said, getting involved in this, it's a very interesting move to say the least. We'll see when this gets officially announced. We'll probably have a video breaking this down when it gets announced. But like I said, remember, this is just its own separate thing. And having Dana White involved is absolutely huge because viewership for the UFC is a little bit higher than NASCAR's, and people will tune into this. The question will be what drivers you can get. It's unknown at this point, but it's pretty cool and interesting to see that it sounds like Dana White is interested in owning a NASCAR-related series, which, of course, is an electric series. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Todd Gilliland. Now, I did a video discussing this on the channel a couple days ago, but it was confirmed on early Wednesday morning that Todd Gilliland has signed a multi-year contract extension with Front Row Motorsports. Now, terms were not disclosed, but it at least is a 2-year deal, and the number has not been announced at this point. But my expectation is that Todd Gilliland is going to remain in the 38 car next year, though he could move over to the 34 car as it is the flagship car, and Front Row is looking at Todd Gilliland to be the leader going forward and lead this team to success. Todd Gilliland, this is the right decision. This is the first time that Front Row really has done a multi-year deal. I think they look at them not getting Michael McDowell for multiple years or giving them enough money and realizing we probably should sign a driver to a multi-year deal so they don't end up walking away and leaving. Todd Gilliland, in my opinion, is an exceptionally talented and a very great race car driver who always gets the best out of equipment. And you look at where he's been in the points. 2022, I think he finished 31st or 30th in the standings. 2022 finished 26th or 27th or 28th. And right now this year, his average finish has improved to 19th or 20th, and he's currently sitting 22nd or 23rd in the standings with 4 consecutive top 20 finishes. Every single year, Todd Gilliland gets better. And I get very similar replies with Todd Gilliland to Michael McDowell. When Michael McDowell joined Front Row Motorsports in 2018, he ran about 30th every single week. But as the years have built up and gone on, Michael McDowell has become a playoff contender, and he's been qualifying a lot better as well. Same thing for Todd Gilliland, who's been qualifying better, it seems like, every single year. And I think this is the right decision and right call for Front Row Motorsports to bring Todd Gilliland in. Now, what are my expectations for Todd Gilliland going forward with Front Row Motorsports? I think that Todd Gilliland is going to do a really solid job with this team going forward, and I expect him to get better. Now, the big question will be who will be the other two drivers. We'll talk about that here in the silly season portion of this video in just a little bit. But Todd Gilliland getting a multi-year extension, like I said, makes a ton and a lot of sense, right? Because Todd Gilliland has been doing an excellent and a great job. And I think he deserves this extension. And, I remember last year, I should say, when they cut him a few races and he drove for Rick Ware, and we're all thinking, is he going to leave Front Row? But of course, he's got the family ties and connection. David Gilliland drove for this team for many, many years. So it makes a ton and a lot of sense to bring Todd Gilliland back in the fold and have David Gilliland be involved in some sort of capacity as well. I'm really happy to see this. My expectations going next year is for Todd Gilliland to try to finish in the top 20 points because every single year he gets better. And I think with them getting the Tier 1 support, I think it's only going to make Todd Gilliland a much stronger and a much better race car driver. So I'm very happy for Todd Gilliland. I think this is an excellent and a great move for the team's sake, and glad to see that Todd Gilliland will at least be staying with Front Row Motorsports for at least a couple more years and will stick around in the car going forward into the foreseeable future with this team. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Front Row Motorsports once again. As it was reported by Adam Stern last night that Front Row Motorsports has agreed to pay $20 to $25 million for a charter from Stewart Racing. We'll talk about all their teams will be looking for charters in just a second. But remember, it was announced about a week ago that Front Row Motorsports will be expanding to a 3-car operation starting in 2025. We know that Todd Gilliland is going to be one of those drivers next season. The question will be, who will be the other two drivers? We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But Front Row, of course, like I said, becoming a Tier 1 team. They're also expected to move into the Stewart Racing shop starting in 2025. One of the SHR shops has been sold at this point from what I've heard, and likely that will be the move that ends up taking place. Now, according to the same report, 2311 Racing and Trackhouse Racing are two of the other organizations that are expected to buy at least one of the charters. But a very interesting thing that's noted in here is there could be as many as 6 charters that are up for grabs in 2025. Not just 4 from SHR, but apparently 2 other charters that could be available going into next year. I think this is very, very interesting to kind of take a look at, right? Is that where could these other 2 charters go? Could we see a team like Rick Ware Racing sell a charter off and sell it to another team? That could potentially be an option where they downsize a 1-car program, but I don't know if Rick Ware is going to downsize next year. You also, of course, have a team like Kaulig Racing. We know that Chris Rice has stated publicly that Kaulig Racing is not planning to sell charters, but if the price is right, because charters are going down to $20 to $25 million, if you don't want to sell that charter at this point, you want to sell one to make a little more money. If you sell both your charters, they're going to make around $50 million. And also, a lot of people are looking at BJ McLeod, right, where basically he sold it for $40 million. You do need to remember one key thing that needs to come into play. It's not just BJ McLeod who owned the charter. It was Matt Tifft and Joe Falk. Joe Falk gets half that money back because Joe Falk had half equity in ownership in that charter. So while BJ McLeod did get a lot of money from the charter, he didn't get all $40 million from selling that charter to Spire. He only got about probably $20 million of that charter money, if that makes any sense. And obviously, the charter values have gone down because, one, you've got 6 charters that are on the market. It's called supply and demand. If you only have 1 or 2 charters on the market, it'd probably be around $40 to $50 million. But the reason they're so low is because of that. Now, going back to the other organizations that could sell one, I think, like I said, RWR and Kaulig could be opportunities because I think those teams could truly end up selling charters at the end of the year. But again, $20 to $25 million isn't a shocker's price. And like I mentioned a second ago, 2311 Racing and Trackhouse are going to get one. Now, who could get that 4th charter from SHR? My speculation is it's going to be Richard Childress Racing. It's no secret that RCR is looking to expand going into the 2025 season for someone like a Noah Gregson. Because Noah Gregson could potentially move over to RCR with the Bass Pro Shops connection, though he could end up over at JGR next year. I think Noah Grayson could end up over there in 25 because Austin Dillon has signed an extension with the team, and Kyle Busch, we know as of right now, is going to be staying with them at RCR at least for the 2025 season. So it's very interesting to look at for sure when it comes to the charter market, among other things at this point. But like I mentioned and said, I think there's going to be multiple charters and multiple teams up for grabs going into the 2025 year and 2025 season. And like I said, it's very interesting to look at, right, is who will be the teams that do get the rest of the charters. They'll probably be asked in the media over the week. I know Denny's kind of said that we're waiting for a charter agreement to get done to buy one, but everyone is expecting that Denny Hamlin is going to buy a charter at some point for the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going to head jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, I had reported about a week or two ago that Dale Jr. was not going to be buying a charter from Stewart Racing. So initially I thought that Junior Motorsports was not going to be going Cup racing in 2025. But that may not entirely be true. Dale Jr. spoke on the fact about the charter situation, about him and whether or not his team is looking to buy a charter. And Dale Jr. wants to be a Cup owner, but the price of charters is really high. However, Dale Jr. said that he and Kelly are still looking at the charter market and is still on the table. I talked about it here just a second ago, but it does sound like that, like I said, the charter prices are going to drop. There's a couple reasons for that. One, like I mentioned, supply and demand is very, very high at the moment. And when you have a lot of supply in potential, that demand is going to be a lot lower, meaning charter prices are going to be a lot cheaper. If you're Dale Jr., I'm not saying I want to spend Dale Jr.'s money, but if I was Dale Jr. and I had the chance and opportunity to go Cup Series racing, whether it's open or full-time, I'm absolutely going to take that chance and opportunity. There's another option for Dale Jr. is that he could basically buy into a charter situation. Maybe go and look at some team like JTG Doherty. We're expecting Tad and Jody Geschecter to leave at the end of this season. They're expected to leave the organization to JTG and go over to Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2025 calendar year. So we're expecting that to end up taking place. And I can see Dale Jr. working with Brad Doherty next season, helping Ricky Stenhouse Jr. out. Dale and Brad have worked together at NBC for many, many years, so I could definitely see that being an option and possibility. And let's say Dale Jr. does actually go with it and buys a charter and joins the Cup Series next year. Who could be the drivers that do join the scene? Well, what about Josh Berry and Ronnie Childers if Josh Berry doesn't go to front row next year? I think Josh Berry, because Dale Jr. wants to see where Josh Berry is going to go, and he believes that Josh Berry and Ronnie Childers together will be an awesome and a great pairing to continue, because I think that they're both gelling very, very well. That could be an option going into next year. What about Sam Mayer? Sam Mayer brings sponsorship money to the table, and there's been rumors that Sam Mayer could be going Cup racing next year, so Sam Mayer could definitely be an option for 2025. What about a driver, let's say, like a guy like Matt Benedetto jumps out of the Ford camp and goes over to Chevy? That could be an option going into next year. What about someone like a Kyle Weatherman? Kyle Weatherman brings sponsorship and funding to the table a little bit, and we know DGM likes him very much, but Kyle Weatherman, I think his aspirations go Cup, and I think he's still doing sim work for Hendrick Motorsports at the moment. What about a team, drivers like Sammy Smith and Justin Allgaier, and of course Brandon Jones? They bring sponsorship and funding to the table. And of course, I look at drivers like Connor Zilic as well, who could get the chance and opportunity to do this. I think it's going to be very interesting to see, because I think Junior Motorsports in the Cup Series is something that I think many of us, including myself, have been dreaming for many, many years. Because Junior Motorsports, like I said, in Cup would be huge. I think they would instantly become the most popular team and the most popular organization in the Cup Series going forward if they were to join up. And I want to see it, right? I think we all want to see Junior Motorsports in the Cup Series in 2025. And I've been saying for a long time that it's going to happen. I think with the prices of charters dropping a bit down around at that $20, $25 million range, I don't think charters are really going to end up getting cheaper anytime soon. So if you're Dale Jr., I think this would be the right time and opportunity to go after one and invest in one. Maybe not like, let's say, bring every personnel from your team up, because another big thing to look at is a grandfather clause, because Rick Hendrick does have ownership in the team and organization. But I think Dale Jr. would easily be able to ask Rick, get your name off my ownership table, and I think Rick would still agree to work with Dale Jr. there. To me, I would absolutely love to see this end up happening where Junior Motorsports can make the jump up the Cup. Do I think it's going to happen? I think it's unknown and unclear at this point, but I think many of us, including myself, truly do want to see Junior Motorsports up in the Cup Series in the 2025 year. Again, we'll end up seeing what ends up happening if they do decide to move up. I know Junior says he's not buying a charter right now, but I think the more that Junior talks about it, the more likely it does truly end up happening. So we'll see if it ends up happening next year, whether Junior Motorsports move up. Personally, like I said, I want to see it happen next year, right? Because I think Junior Motorsports in the Cup Series would make a ton and would make a lot of sense for the future of the sport. So like I said, we'll end up seeing what happens and see if Junior Motorsports does finally make the jump up the Cup. Because like I said, Junior's interested in getting a charter. We'll see if he ends up and truly ends up doing it in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're doing a silly season checkpoint and silly season update. Now, Bob Pockus earlier this week put out a really good article surrounding NASCAR's silly season, some of the impending decisions that could be made in the not-so-distant future. First, Martin Truex Jr.'s 2025 plans have not been announced at this moment, but he needs to make a decision whether he'll be coming back in 2025 or not. I saw something earlier today that Martin Truex Jr. may make a decision as early as this weekend if he is returning in 2025 or not. Some indicate that he may retire at the end of the year, and some indicate that Martin Truex Jr. will be coming back in 2025. Shall Martin Truex Jr. retire at the end of 2024, not come back in 2025? There are a lot of drivers who are candidates for the seat going into next year. One of those is Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith currently drives the number 81 car for Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and has been having a very solid and great job. And is currently one of the reserve drivers for Toyota at this moment. So Chandler Smith is the front runner. He's been doing a really good job in Xfinity, and I think he's the most likely candidate to take over the seat. Another option is Eric Jones. Eric Jones, like I said, drives a 43 car for Legacy Motor Club. He's driven for JGR in the past, and I think he would do a really good job taking over for Martin Truex Jr. But I don't know if he'd do absolutely as good as MTJ has done. So I'm not sure Eric Jones would be the most easy likely option. Another option is Eric Almirola. Jordan Bianchi had reported that Eric Almirola could be an option for this 19 car next year going back to Cup. But I'm not sure Eric Almirola would do an excellent and great job, and there's been some really weird rumors, speculation on Almirola, so I don't know if he will be an option next year. Then you have Chase Briscoe. Chase Briscoe is another name that's been mentioned potentially for the 19 car, and I think the other one was Noah Gragson. We'll get to Noah Gragson and Chase Briscoe, though, in just a little bit. Let's move on to talk about Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with 23XI Racing. The terms have not been announced at the moment, but many are expecting that Bubba Wallace is going to sign at least a 2 to 3 year extension with the number 23 team. He's been getting better every single year, and he's got a chance to make the playoffs here, and he could win a few races. He's had the pace and speed to get a couple victories so far this year, so I think he will get this extension in the not-so-distant future. Let's move on to talk about Chase Briscoe. Now, Chase Briscoe, like I mentioned, is a name that's been mentioned for the 19 car for next year, but many are expecting that Chase Briscoe is going to be joining the Wood Brothers in 2025. Harrison Burton has been struggling immensely so far in the 2024 season, and he said this at Daytona early in the year, but this was a make-or-break year for him, so he really needed to step it up to the plate. And Harrison Burton has struggled immensely. If you put Chase Briscoe in that 21 car next year, he will take that car to the playoffs in 2025. So I think have a chance to make the playoffs. So I think Chase Briscoe is going to go to the Wood Brothers next year. Let's go to Noah Gragson. Noah Gragson's also looking for a job in 2025, and there are a lot of teams that are looking at Noah Gragson. I think he's probably actually the most highly coveted free agent at the moment because of his performance at SHR this season. So there's a few teams that could be possibilities. He could stay with Ford and go to Front Row. Front Row could have a 3 to 4 car team next year, so he could definitely go there next year. There's also Joe Gibbs Racing as an option because of the Bass Pro connection, but if I'm not mistaken, Toyota really does not like Noah Gragson, and they had a really big falling out at the end of the year, so I don't think Noah Gragson goes there. Another team's mentioned, this is where I think he's going to end up, Richard Childress Racing. It's no secret that RCR is looking to expand to a 3-car operation in 2025. We know Austin Dillon recently signed a multi-year extension with the team, and we also know Kyle Busch is coming back next year. That has been confirmed. So Noah Gragson is potentially going to go to a 3rd RCR car. And a big reason is because of the Bass Pro Shops connection. They've had a big connection for many, many years. Bass Pro really likes Noah Gragson, so I think Noah Gragson will end up at RCR in the 2025 year. Let's talk about Shane Van Gisbergen and Zane Smith. This is one of the more intriguing things coming out. So, with the potential of a 3-car rule coming in for the Cup teams that are chartered, there is a really big dilemma going on over right now with these two drivers. Do you choose Shane Van Gisbergen or Zane Smith? Zane Smith, let's be honest, has struggled immensely this year with Spire Motorsports. He is the worst in the owners' points currently at the moment. I know he's had a couple decent runs, a couple top 20s this year, but he's generally been struggling running outside of the top 30 and has not been having a good year. But I think that he's getting the scraps of the 77 car from last year. Or do you choose Shane Van Gisbergen? Shane Van Gisbergen has finished on lead lap in all but 2 races so far this season, and also has been running in all but 3 races, I should say. And Shane Van Gisbergen just picked up his first career Xfinity Series win at Portland. I think he's probably the favorite to win the Cup Series, not the Cup race, the Xfinity Series race at Portland this weekend. Who do you choose? Well, it sounds like, according to Bob Pockrass, SVG is the most likely option to go into the seat. Look, as much as I like Zane Smith, I think that SVG is the better choice. I think SVG is getting better. He's been running better on ovals recently. I know he says he's been struggling on it, but I've been seeing more improvement in performance on ovals. I think that SVG is going to end up getting chosen. Let's move over to front row for a second. They're expected to be a 3-car team. You know, Todd Gilliland has signed a multi-year extension. What happens to the other drivers? Well, I think Cole Custer and Josh Berry are going to be the other 2 drivers at the team. I think Josh Berry is going to be a package deal with Rodney Childers in the 36 car, and I think Cole Custer goes to the 34. Cole Custer is expected to bring Haas Automation with him over to the organization next season, and I think Josh Berry brings some of his sponsors over. I think that you need a veteran over there. Rodney Childers is the most highly coveted free agent out of SHR right now, so I think he goes to front row to make their program a lot better. He's going to be able to help that team grow and develop as an organization next season. And then you have some of the other situations. Kaulig Racing and Rick Ware. I think next year Daniel Hemrick will stay in the 31. And I actually think that when it comes to the 16 car, I actually do believe that Kaulig Racing will get Zane Smith next year. Zane Smith brings sponsorship to the table a little bit. And I think with the alliance they have with Trackhouse, I think that's where he ends up next year. Rick Ware could be a 2 to 3 car team next year. They could have a different lineup. I think Riley Herbst, this is where he likely ends up. We'll get to him in just a second. We also have drivers like Haley Deegan, Matt Benedetto, even Kaz Grall, and even Cody Ware, who could be options next year. And finally, let's talk about some of the other notable drivers that are not signed at the moment for this season. Corey Heim. Corey Heim is the current favorite take over the third 2311 racing car. They're expected, like I mentioned earlier, to get a third charter. Carl Edwards, we know, is not coming out of retirement. Kurt Busch could make some starts in the future, but it won't be in the third car at this point. And I don't think Chandler Swift, Eric Almirola are options. So I think Corey Heim will be the third driver. But Riley Herbst has emerged as a secret option as a possibility. Riley Herbst does have sponsorship and funding for Monster Energy, and I think that could play a big role in him potentially getting in this seat in 2025. But I think Riley Herbst more than likely goes to Rick Ware, and I think Corey Heim goes to 2311 Racing next year. It would make more sense than anybody else. Again, you go back to Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith is the front runner currently at the moment to go to one of the JGR seats, but he could also remain in Xfinity next year. Christian Eck and Sam Mayer, they also could be Cup drivers in 2025. Sam Mayer could go to Kaulig, could go to Junior Motorsports if they move up the Cup. That could be an option next year. And then you have Christian Eckes, who also could go to Kaulig Racing next year. Christian Eckes has been doing a really good job in trucks this year. He's been the closest things to basically Corey Heim in 2024, and I think he could be an option in 2025. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with silly season. These drivers could join drivers in Cup like Ross Chastain, Chase Elliott, Brad Keselowski, Kyle Larson, you name it, and Kyle Busch as well as options for 2025. We're going to wait and see how silly season plays out, but some big changes are coming for the silly season very, very soon. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think Junior Motorsports is going to join Cup? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think SVG will be a full-time Cup driver in 2025? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I don't think there'll be any more videos dropping today. Tomorrow, there's going to be a silly season update dropping on the channel in the morning. We're going to have the Xfinity Series race review and SVG video if he doesn't win the race. We'll also have the Cup reaction to qualifying. And we're also on Sunday going to have the starting lineup video. And we're also going to have the Cup Series race review from Sonoma. And then there should be a NASCAR news video along with the entry list video for Iowa. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.